I I share about what my organization has been doing on this issue and what our findings have been so far. So while I do congratulate you for holding an event like this, I really think the constituency you should be talking to are community groups working on women's rights, because they are the ones who are closest on the ground and could enrich your understanding on the issue. It's not a legal subject, it's a socio-economic subject first. How did Partners for Law and Development get involved in this issue? That's, obviously a question. We are based in Delhi. A lot of our work is outside Delhi. We work with community groups in the tribal states as well as other states. So over the years, we were hearing again and again when we were doing trainings on domestic violence law, other, the sexual offences under the Indian Penal Code. We kept hearing this issue of witch hunting being spoken of in Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, where we were working. And we wondered why we knew so little about it, why no legal resource group was working on it. And because we were interested, our first entry point was, let's go to the ground and understand the issue. I think that's as part of human rights lawyering, that's the fundamental step we need to take, is create an evidence base, understand the trends, the causes, and then see what the victims really need. So our starting point has to be bottom up. We are, since the last 4 years, first we did desk research, which is why we got this poster made. Then we did consultations across the country, supported by the National Women's Commission, and I've given a copy of the report to some of you. And currently what we are doing is, we are doing in-depth field research in Jharkhand, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, and in Assam. So we are looking at the stories of 64 women and a few men included who were branded as witches. Our interrogation of their lives does not begin from the point they are branded, but begins much before they are branded, to understand what personal and social reasons make a person vulnerable to branding. I think that's very important. If you look at a situation from the point of branding or from the time of branding, we create a very colonial discourse of us and them, where we are enlightened, we will educate them, but they are, practicing some kind of barbaric, unenlightened practice. I think we need to know how the poor or people in remote areas settle their conflicts and how we settle our conflicts. So that's one lesson. The other is that we have, in addition to these 64 cases which we are looking at, we've looked at about more than 50 reported judgments on which involve witch hunting. We've looked at the NCRB data. We've also looked at district level Thana records. And I think that would be illuminate the problem to some extent. If you look at the NCRB, it's practiced in 17 states. And if you look at over 5 years, Haryana is ranking very high. So my one recommendation would be, which has been as well to the NCW, do a fact finding in Haryana. Let's not assume that this is witch hunting of the kind that we want to see. It might be it's very contextual. In every area it's very contextual. Unless we don't understand the ground, we cannot extrapolate a law or a policy from that. The emerging trends we've seen historically, we've known witch hunting to be called related to superstition, pertaining to single women and widows. What we see in our cases is a lot of married women are involved, some young women are involved, and it goes down generations. So a woman, her daughter, her daughter-in-law, granddaughter would all suffer the consequences of branding. There are land conflicts within the family. So even if two brothers are having a dispute, the wife of the brother will be branded branded as a witch, to really break the family backbone. Often these are in cases where the woman is playing a stronger role in the economic regeneration of the family. So women who have played a role in really changing the economic status of the family or are socially very active or politically active are targeted regardless of whether they are married. Then there is the issue of, we talk about people who are uneducated. We've come across at least 2 cases where ASHA workers have been instrumental in branding women as witches. So it happens amongst the educated too. There is a whole spectrum in branding. Not everything ends up as the Lachkera case. I think the Lachkera case is the tip of the iceberg. The most common way of branding is to isolate the person, to socially boycott the person, to not employ the person or to not be employed by the person. So are we looking at the spectrum of social boycott, or are we only looking at what we think is very grotesque and makes for a good horror story? Because 90% of it is not good horror story material. It is breaking somebody socially, economically. We've seen people have to leave their places. A large number of women who are affected do not need penal remedies or recourse to the penal laws. They want somebody to stand by them and to ensure that their dignity, their social relations are restored, that there is an apology, that their work continues, that that periodically their house is not broken down and they are not harmed in other indirect ways. Now, can we assure that kind of thing? So I think it's a very broad-based problem, which hunting often is an excuse. We have seen it spread from tribal communities to OBCs to upper caste communities. It is not limited only to the most backward areas. Branding happens in various ways. We live in a very irrational society. We have one TV channel called Astha, which is dedicated to very unscientific discourses. We have people who do Vastu. We have leaders who do that. We have scientists who follow that. We have people who wear rings on every finger when they get sick or when they want something. So it's not just about the, we do live essentially in an irrational society. We need to accept that. And it will take different manifestations for different social and class groups. So let's look at it in a larger spectrum and not in an us and them. One of the points that came out very strongly in the film that we saw is the structural issues that allow the targeting of women to reach proportions like the one we saw. Can we make non-registration of FIR a very serious offense? For the first time, the 2013 Amendment Act, and we fought for it because we were very active in fighting for the anti-rape law. We saw that the policeman now can get a 6 months imprisonment, up to 6 months imprisonment, and fine for non-registration of FIR. Can we increase that? We fought to ensure that the army and the security forces get tried under the criminal law for rape. We have not succeeded in that. Can we ensure accountability? Because if one of the problems is that the Indian Penal Code is not working, it is not being implemented, we can't create another penal law and expect it will be implemented. I think, can we build accountability is my question. If there is no primary healthcare center, can we maybe make one individual or 2 individuals accountable for that? If there are no doctors in that healthcare center, can we make somebody accountable for that? Let's not penalize more and more people. Can we talk about a regime of accountability? Because we pretend that people should really act differently when they have no education, no roads, no healthcare. And I'm afraid we are not going to do that because we are punishing the already very oppressed people. And we haven't, we can't solve patriarchy with criminal laws, no matter how important criminal laws are. Another lesson that we learned is that this is really a facet of gender-based violence. We pick on women who, like many people said, who go beyond their status as women, either because they have transgressed, they own property, they are strong, they have leadership qualities, and so on. So we are talking about gender-based violence here and gender discrimination. We are not really only talking about witch hunting. I would be very uncomfortable with a dedicated law, national law on witch hunting, because we would first have to prove that the intention was witchcraft. And we see with the Atrocities Act, we know casteism is rampant in our country, but we do not find the Atrocities Act being used, because we need to, one, have a caste certificate, two, we have to show that there was a casteist intention. We don't want to create more and more hurdles. If we're talking about gender-based violence, let's ensure that the Indian Penal Code is operationalized like it should. One of the things that we found out in our discussions around the country is that 3 states already have a law. It works in Chhattisgarh, it doesn't work that well in Jharkhand and Bihar, because the Jharkhand-Bihar laws are much older and there is no culture of implementation. I think with the Lachkhera, things changed in Chhattisgarh. And they didn't merely adopt a law. Jharkhand merely adopted the Bihar law. Assam is talking about its law. Orissa is in the process of making its rules. Rajasthan has a generic law on gender-based violence, which the State Commission is working on, which covers witch hunting and many other things. So what we are looking for is greater accountability for gender-based violence, and the findings of my organization thus far is that we do not need a national law. Women are going to be accused of misusing it. The real women who get targeted will have no recourse to the law, because they will have to first prove witchcraft. In many of the cases, in the 64 cases, we didn't find a clear evidence of witchcraft. We would fail the test of beyond reasonable doubt. If we are wanting to help victims, we need to study the ground realities. My strong recommendation is to create an evidence base, understand what rural women face, because even the laws we have do not get implemented in rural areas. As a result of our work on witch hunting, we strongly lobbied for the 2013 Amendment Act. We got intention to disrobe and the disrobing of women in public places to be a cognizable and a non-bailable offence. That is already taken care of. Can we ensure that it's applied? We got acid attack provision to be broadened to include disfigurement by any other means. And I think we need to look at more generic application, because women are targeted. What happened in Guwahati last year in July when a woman was molested and stripped naked? What happened in Bangalore when women in the pub were stripped naked? They were not branded as witches, but they needed legal intervention. Every time when a certain kind of atrocity is perpetrated, it is not because they are witches. We live in an extremely patriarchal and misogynist environment, and the law enforcers do not respond when we have a case of violence against women, even in the city. So we know that after December 16, very recently, with the new law in force, the 5-year-old girl who was raped in Delhi, which is now, at least a high level of consciousness, the police tried to give money to close the case. That's unfortunately what we are dealing with. We are dealing with an implementation machinery that's not accountable. And so if they're talking about, yes, I have a 5-minute deadline, I will keep to that. I think we need to do a needs analysis to understand what women need, how the problem pans itself out. More and more, we find that whether it's patriarchy, whether it's gender discrimination, whether it's witch hunting or caste, these issues get get transformed into new forms of discrimination. They don't disappear. So we do practice gender discrimination, but in very many new ways. We didn't see it earlier. So it's not enough to say because we don't see an old pattern existing, it doesn't exist. What we need to understand is to not get caught up with the reason. It's like splitting hair between dowry and domestic violence. We got a law on dowry, but we found women were going on being killed. And then we had to get a law on domestic violence, because sometimes it's for dowry, sometimes it's for bad cooking, sometimes it's for she didn't give birth to a son, she's too beautiful, she's not too beautiful. There are myriad of reasons why women are unworthy. And so if we recognize our society for what it is, and we recognize that we want social transformation in that women get easily targeted for everything, we need to address that. Let's not get caught up in these exotic things where we are seen as saviors. We are not saviors. We are actually, our own liberation, as Gandhi said, is tied up with the liberation of every woman and every Dalit in this country. So as long as we don't see ourselves as part of the picture, part of the problem, and we work with people who are affected, I'm afraid these conference room discussions, which begin with law, are not going to really touch the lives of women who are affected. Thank you.